Recording. So whenever you are ready.
All right, it looks like you've got one in the waiting room. Oh, there they popped in now. All right, very good. Well, we're a small group, but thank you for taking the time out of your evening to listen in on our presentation. As Victor said, if you have questions, there are a couple of ways to handle that during the presentation. You can use the reactions and raise a hand, or type something into the chat, and we'll try to answer that way. And then maybe if you just jot something down as I'm moving through it, we'll definitely have time for question and answer when the presentation is complete. Ben, this will be presentation number 13 over the last few weeks. So I try to remember from previous meetings just all of the things that have come up. But if I don't cover some of the information that you're specifically interested in, I'm more than happy to answer the questions. So our presentation begins with our slogan there at the bottom: great schools equal great communities. It is my contention and the belief of our board that there are many communities in our state that call themselves great communities, a great place to live. But what we all agree on is that in order for a place to consider itself a great community, it starts with the foundational piece of great schools, the facilities, the program, the results. We believe that we are a great community, and we believe that it is in no small part due to our great schools and the interest and the investment over time that community members have made, and we are now asking them to make again. Great schools definitely equal great communities. So just a review of where this presentation came from, where the program came from. TMP architecture, and we have Eduardo from TMP here tonight, maybe to help answer questions if they come up. We've had a long relationship with TMP. They are the firm that helped us build the high school from the 1998 vote, and our other programs in the elementary and the middle school in 2001 and 2003. So long relationship with TMP. They've done nice work for us. They did a facility assessment and looked at things in 2014 and did a little update on that in late 2019, mainly to identify building deficiencies and where things stood at that time. That information moved the district to welcome a committee that we called the Building Futures Committee, comprised of parents, teachers, coaches, administrators, and community members. That got started just about at the beginning of the pandemic in the late winter of 2020. So we had several meetings and learned quickly just how this format works, the digital or virtual format. And we tried to focus on the vision of the district and the sorts of things from the facility study that needed to be taken care of. During that process, that group looked at 9 different configurations of how to improve our facilities, upgrade them, and take care of all of the things that were coming due, but also knowing how much money each thing would cost and would it fit within the 7.2 mils that was currently being levied. We didn't want to increase that at all. So the group spent a lot of time looking at a lot of different configurations and settled on the program that you're going to take a look at tonight. During that process, we did some surveying to see how people felt about different varieties of those programs. We got the input back. We took a little break from the spring of 21 to the fall. We got back together in September of 21, eventually settled on a decision of what to take to the board. And then in November of last year, the presentation was made to the board. The board agreed and are putting this issue on the ballot coming up next Tuesday for a zero increase bond program to address our facilities. All the while, we tried to keep our eye on these items. Operational efficiency, could we figure out some way to reduce our costs in the end in terms of our facilities, but also upgrade the infrastructure, the bones of the buildings and how they're put together and their longevity. We wanted to focus on future-ready learning environments. Obviously, the buildings that we utilize, aside from the high school, have been in service for a long time. Most of them were constructed in an age when education was very different and instruction was delivered in a very specific way. Straight rows, addressing, looking forward and being addressed by a teacher. Modern education is a lot different. There's movement, there's change daily, hourly, activity, technology. So a future-ready learning environment takes all that into account. No small item, enhanced safety and security. Again, all of our buildings were designed at a time when there were just certain things that we didn't worry about and didn't have to worry about. But we all know the reasons for that change. And sad as it may be, it is something that we need to identify and enhance our own ability to keep people safe in our buildings. And then lastly, we want to increase our program opportunities for students. I mentioned the different modes of instruction. There are different types of things that we want kids to learn through: technology, hands-on, engineering, science, and they need the lab space, the maker space, they call it, and places to store things that kids can get their hands on. And then all doing this with no increase to the current bond millage rate of 7.2 mils. So the first segment has to do with the lower and upper elementary. That would be kindergarten through fourth grade. And this is the point where I usually make fun of Eduardo's big red crab, the creature that eats Tecumseh. But in that picture, we were going for a couple of different things with this layout when we talked about it. First of all, we wanted to make sure that 135,000 square feet would fit in that property and that it could go in a way that would allow us to use Tecumseh Acres, which you can see underneath that illustration of the parking lot. We would still want to use that building during construction. So, this rendition shows that we could do that. Also, you notice that it has 4 legs, and the Building Futures Committee was very sensitive about thinking about a design that might indicate the tradition or the heritage of the elementary schools in our district: Herrick Park, Patterson, Sutton, and Tecumseh Acres. So 4 wings there. Now, having said all that, I point down to the bottom left where it says conceptual site plan. That design process and what would finally end up being in that place may look nothing like that, but those are the reasons for that concept in the way that it's drawn. I mentioned the design process, and I compare this to the project going on in Clinton they passed a $34 million bond in November of 2020. And in the spring now of 2022, they just poured the footings on the first part of that build where they're adding on to their preschool. So they haven't even addressed building at their school sites. The design process takes a long time, and you want to make sure that you get it right, because you can't undo anything after it's done. So there's still a lot to do in terms of how that building would look. We would involve the community. We would be talking to our families. We would be talking to our staff and interested parties to make sure that we came up with a great design. And the other thing about that site that is, I think, exciting is while we were talking about this, I went to the city and said, hey, that property that you have off of Union Street that backs up to Tecumseh Acres, can we talk about that? Because I wanted to put this driveway through that property. And you can see on the map, Union Street is on the right-hand side to the east, and Adrian to the west, Patterson up to the north, and Spafford down to the south. But what the city told me, and I didn't know, was that there was a property exchange between the city and the schools in the 80s, and then the schools got that piece of property. So we already own it, which is great. We don't have to spend any money or really come to any agreements to be able to access Union Street as either traffic flow or a bus loop. But the important part about that is this would give us the ability to bring kids in and send them out, whether it's on a bus or in their car, from 4 different directions: north, south, east, and west, and a variety of different streets in order to drain that traffic or receive it. So that was an exciting part of the process, was finding out that we had easy access to Union Street that would service that property. So the statistics there on the left-hand side, 135,000 square feet. Now that's a reduction. Currently our elementary program fits into about 165,000 square feet between the 4 buildings. But by bringing them all together, we can reduce and economize and still, through efficiencies, fit that number of students on that campus and get them into one building. That reduces our overall facility usage from 6 buildings and 6 properties down to 3. So a very efficient way of, right down to snow removal and lawn care, and parking lots, and all those things that can deteriorate over time. We would have fewer of those things now when we go to this property. All the things that I mentioned earlier, the modern learning environments, flexible furniture is really just furniture that can move and change very easily. I'll show some examples of that in an upcoming slide. Instructional technology, teacher workstations, student playfields. There are a few that are outlined on the conceptual site plan. There's definitely room for all that. One of the questions that usually comes up about the playgrounds is, people are aware that we are currently putting 2 new very nice playground pieces at Herrick Park and Patterson. And we have an assurance from the company that they will move, reassemble, and recertify both of those pieces one time down the road. So when this building goes up as a result of the successful bond, then we'll still be able to use those new pieces of equipment. Again, security systems. None of our elementaries were ever built for the sorts of challenges that we face with security. So this would be a new build that would be designed from the ground up, looking at safety. Again, I explained being able to come to this campus from 4 different directions, separation between the buses and the traffic. separate parking for parents and visitors and our employees, probably separate kindergarten drop off and pick up. So that whole process has changed so much during my career, and places are now specifically designed to handle the kind of traffic that hits twice a day on those campuses. So here's some conceptual pictures of 21st century elementary school spaces. In terms of flexible spaces, you see that not every one of those pictures looks like the kind of classroom that maybe most of us experienced when we were young. I think the one in the bottom left does a nice job of showing that all those tables and all those stools are on wheels. So if the teacher is doing some direct instruction and they would like to have small numbers of people at the table, but then there's going to be an activity where she wants larger groups together, within seconds, even 6, 7, 8-year-old kids can move those tables together and restart the lesson rather quickly. That's the idea of flexible furniture. It can move quickly and it can become different things without much effort. The middle school, the current building on Maumee Street, some people still remember it as the old high school. One of the things that we need to take a look at there is a new safe and secure entry. Again, not many of our sites were built at a time when that was a concern. So the idea, if you know that property, when you come in the front doors off of Maumee Street, you enter through the main foyer and the office is across the way. And once you're buzzed in, without very much effort, somebody who wanted to do something can now take a left and go down a student hallway, go down to the right, and you're in the media center, or upstairs, or out to the pool, down another hallway. Very quick and easy access. So the idea is to create a new entry in the forward area in the footprint, which is now the media center or library. We would have people enter through that area and redesign that space into an office suite with conference rooms and meeting spaces. And then the current office suite would be redesigned into the media center, and that's a big safety upgrade. There are 27 different entries into the middle school, and we currently only have eyes or cameras on 3 of them. So having dedicated security where people have to pass through is an important piece. Another thing that's important, a few bullets down, the driveways and parking lots. Again, that was a high school, been a dozen or so additions to that site over time. And the how you get onto and off of that campus has always been done through painting parking lots and putting out cones or putting people out there to direct traffic. There's never been a purposeful way of designing those parking lots so that when employees park, they don't have to walk through traffic to get into the building. So the same is true with bus drop off, safe, secure areas where students are not opposing traffic when they are dropped off from outside. And then the last one is remodeling the swimming pool. There's about $2.5 million in the program to address a lot of which is infrastructure. If you pay a little bit of attention, you know that the pool from time to time is closed, and it is almost always related to either the pump system, the boiler system, or something called a Dectron unit, which is kind of an air handler that seeks to level the temperature between the air and the water in that room. all those things are things you never see, but they have to function in order for the pool to work. And boilers and air handlers and things like that are several $100,000 worth of infrastructure. So we need to make that change. Yes, we do. The city levies a 0.25 mil to run the pool. That's a operational millage only. It brings in about $250,000 every year, and all of that just goes to employee pay and heat and lights and chemicals for the water, but it doesn't save for any of those capital improvements. So those are the highlights of the middle school program. So the swimming pool would also, not just those infrastructure things, new tile work, upgraded locker rooms and showers and things like that. So much more presentable and functional for the public. There are a few pictures of modern middle school design and the flexible furniture and the open spaces and technology and things like that. The high school, the building that is newest in the district, although it is in its 22nd year of service, it surprises me every time that I talk about that it's been 22 years, but it has. And a couple of things were not in place 22 years ago in 2001 when we opened that. First of all, for the auxiliary gym, the basketball seasons were separated. The ladies played their season in the fall, and the boys played in the winter. That has changed, and now all the teams use the gym space at the same time. So those 5 teams vying for a single floor space, you have to get some creative scheduling. If there's a home event like a wrestling meet the same night, then all those teams are trying to squeeze the practice in about an hour and a half. So the auxiliary gym, which was in the original footprint design of the building, would be added on to the south east corner of the athletic area. And then a new music room would also be an addition off the northeast wing of the building. And that's because in 98, when we voted on the high school, there was no orchestra program. And we started an orchestra program in 2004 as a 4th grade program. It eventually grew to the high school, and now we have almost 400 families in the district, 512 that are involved in that program, but no home space for the orchestra to rehearse during the school day. Now, at the high school, they deal with that through scheduling. They just make sure that they don't have choir when orchestra is being taught. So the orchestra has to, reassemble the chairs and set up their music stands. And the real issue is not only those things, but instrument storage. Wooden instruments have to be stored in a temperature controlled and humidity controlled space. They're currently in hallways and in band practice rooms connected to the hallway. So not an ideal situation for those expensive instruments to be moved around in that way. Another interesting piece about the music room is there's a group called the Friends of Tecumseh Orchestra. For about 20 years, they have been fundraising and fundraising and fundraising. And they give that money to the Wilson Foundation, who's been very generous to the community in terms of the arts. They've invested the money for this Friends of the Orchestra, and now they have around $600,000 that they would like to give to the school to dedicate to that construction of that classroom. Now, $600,000 is a is a hefty number, but when you're building 5,000 square feet of commercial classroom space at around $300 per square foot, you're only about a third of the way to being able to do that with the 600,000. So it helps, and it's generous, and we're crazy about the idea. We love it. We want to get it done. We just can't do it with just their money. We have to have some of our own to do it. And this bond issue is helping us take care of that. Again, some updates in security to the office and the entry area, also flexible furniture, upgrades to security and camera systems, and the instructional technology at the high school. Last bit of the program has to do with athletic upgrades. The field turf on the athletic field at the stadium is in year 14 of a 10-year lifespan. Through good care, and not overuse, we've been able to make it last, but that time has passed, and we really need to address it for the safety and usability of that field. That's a $900,000 price tag, and if we don't address it through a bond project, then we're going to have to take it out of our programming money that we get from the state of Michigan, and that's a lot of money that would come out and not be able to be used for curriculum, teachers, teacher pay, administrators, any of that, if we're going to dedicate that money to outside projects. Also is the outdoor team locker room. If you've ever been to an event there, you walk in and you go over to the home bleachers. There's a grassy area that was dedicated for a locker room space, never finished. And right now our teams and the visiting teams as well have to trot across the driveway and down to the south end of the soccer field and go into the storage barn there. There's no water in those buildings, in that storage barn. There's no restroom facilities. It's just a bunch of chairs set up for coaches to address their kids pregame, halftime, and postgame. So not ideal, and we want to get that athletic area finished up. I get questions about two other things on the athletic campus. One of them is the tennis courts, and another is a restroom facility on the east side of the driveway by soccer, baseball, and softball. Those items did not fit in the final program, but there are ways that they could be addressed as a result of a successful result. And that is, if we're not trying to save money for roofs and boilers and parking lots and football fields and Dectron units, if we don't have to save the money for that, then we could save some of that money and address the badly needed upgrades to the tennis courts and putting in a restroom and storage facility on that East Athletic campus. So they are connected, even though those two that I mentioned aren't part of this program right now. Now, I say right now because there's some money in here that I'll talk about in a minute that could possibly end up addressing some of those smaller items that didn't make the final cut in this presentation. But let me start at the top. The upper and lower elementary is about 47 million of the project. The middle school upgrades, just over 16 million. High school gets almost 7. Athletic upgrades around 2 million. And then here's the one that I was talking about, demolition. So when you make an application to the state of Michigan to offer a bond project, you have to be able to tell them what you're going to do with buildings that you're no longer going to use. So you have to put money just in case into the budget to tear those buildings down if you can't come up with another use for those buildings. So the only building in in the group of 4 that we know has to come down is Tecumseh Acres, because obviously it'll be on that Acres site, and the new building will be there, and we won't need the old building. So $750,000 will go toward that. Sutton might be a great opportunity to talk to the ISD because it's adjacent to the Porter Center, and they're always hungry for space out there. So that is a property that wouldn't necessarily have to be torn down. Herrick Park in Patterson might be something that would be interesting to a developer or possibly the city. I guess in one scenario, we could maybe hang on to one of those properties and use it for an administrative service center, preschool, storage, catch-all of things that we didn't get addressed in this program. So we're not saying that we're definitely going to demolish the buildings, but we had to put money in the program to do that. So if we don't have to tear down all those buildings, some of that money could be reallocated and, like I said, possibly take care of the tennis courts or the bathrooms on the East Athletic Campus. So that all comes to the $75 million. It's a zero increase. The way the payoff works is like this. It would be a 30-year bond. The first 7 years would go to pay off our current debt. We still owe about $12 million between the vote in 98, 2001, and 2003. So the 7.2 mils would cover all of that, some interest on the 75 million that we're asking for this time. And then in year 8 of that 30-year program, all of the money would begin to pay off the 75 million. Now, a little bit over time, percentage-wise, would drop off of that 7.2 mils because you wouldn't need it all to pay the bond off. So that last 23 years, the 7.2 mils decreases slowly over time until it finally disappears in year 30. But no increase to the 7.2 mils that we are currently levying. And in the end, a slow, steady decrease over time. The vote's May 3rd. If you aren't registered yet, you won't be voting in the election. So hopefully that's true. And all of the voters are going to vote at the A.J. Smith Rec Center out by the airport on North Evans. Contact information if you have any more questions after this presentation up until and including Tuesday. And just thank you. I say this each time that I present. An informed voter is what we're asking for. So people who are taking the time to listen and ask questions and think about all of these opportunities. We just really appreciate what you're putting into this. So I'll stop and let you ask questions. I see Louise got a hand up. We'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. So basically, I understand everything. Perhaps I should admit that I get a little confused with some of the things about the football field, but you reassured me on that. Well, what about our teachers? So we're going to do this millage, which you're making it sound more reasonable, but are we going to have access to make sure that we can have enough money to see that we can keep and hire the quality of teachers that we'll want and need?
Yeah, well, Louise, if you weren't confused before, let me confuse you real good now.
Okay.
There's two different pots of money that schools use. The operational budget comes from the state of Michigan in the form of a formula that is the number of kids that attend our district This year it was right around 2,600 kids, K-12. And then they multiply that by what they call the foundation allowance, which for us was $8,700 per kid. So that gives us roughly a budget of about $30 million a year. Every year, that amount, there's actually a proposal for next year that 8,700 would go up. But that's the money that we pay salaries with. That's the money that we have buy curriculum and materials and supplies. So that is separate from the bond. The bond can go to, the bond money can go to building things, buying furniture, critical infrastructure for technology, but it can't pay salaries for teachers or administrators. So those two things are separate. So, you know, the hope would be that as we increase, you know, the district with these upgrades and additions, that we're also going to see an increase in our student enrollment. So actually our ability to hire and pay the best people should go up as a result of keeping up with all of the infrastructure needs in the district.
Okay, that was helpful. I thought we did supply some money. It wasn't just state. So that was helpful. Thank you.
Mhm. Are there any other questions? I can't see the whole board. If anybody's got a hand raised.
I think Grace Point Tim does for
Grace
you.
Point Tim. All right.
Unmute myself there. Yeah,
There you
good
go.
evening. Thanks for the presentation.
Welcome.
Two questions, I guess. One, going clear back to the elementary square footage. With the decrease in the new buildings, what's the present count of elementary kids in the school system now?
The K4 head count is a little bit under 1,000. I'll say probably 925. That the building that we're proposing has a capacity for 1,100. So a little bit of room for growth in the future. The way that they figure that out is they'll allow you to project 5 years into the future when you make your application for the bond. So they don't give you pie in the sky numbers, but they do let you look a little bit down the road. So there's capacity in there for a few more kids than we actually have now.
So is that, do they allow you a certain, a kid is equal to so many square feet is how it's figured?
I'm gonna throw that one to our design expert, Eduardo Blanc.
I knew that was coming to me, Rick. Don't worry.
I tried to nerve toss it as easy as I could.
No, it's okay. Yes, the state actually allocates the square footage per student, but and when we file the bond application with Treasury, we got to justify, you know, like it's typically 25 students per teaching station. But just hearing your question, I think that where you were going to was, you know, how are we going from 160 something to 130 something square feet, 1,000 square feet. And I think that one of the things that is, one of the beauties of this bond program is that having 4 schools, you have 4 kitchens, 4 cafeterias, 4 gymnasiums. You know, you multiply those common space, 4 libraries, for example. So you multiply those spaces by the time of buildings that you have. Those common facilities or part of our facility could be shared by all the students. So there is certainly savings for the district. And of course, that will be saving money in operational cost in the future. And will allow actually to have a larger cafeteria, a larger gymnasium, and larger common spaces for all the students in one building. Hope that answers your question. If not, let me know.
So how do you pull that off scheduling? Because now you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 gyms. And will you have 4 gyms at the new school?
No, actually, we're gonna save that square footage and we're gonna schedule that around it. And I will let probably Rick talk about that, but currently you have the same grades in different buildings. So then you will get all those grades together in one building, right, Rick?
Right, and you know, the PE spaces that we use now are pretty small. So we would actually get you know, a gym space that would be adequate to be able to have more than one class participating at the same time. Many of the elementaries that I've visited over time have what is almost a double-sized competition gym that can be divided into 2 or 4 different smaller spaces with the roll-down drapes from overhead. So we'd have multiple places for kids to participate during that day. The other thing is, what I didn't mention, I'm glad you asked this question, Tim, because I usually mention this. Modern elementary school design does not combine gym space and cafeteria anymore. A separate eating space is used. So we don't have to shut down the gym for 2.5 hours in the middle of the day. And that is another place that we'll be able to capture for programming that we can't do anything about at the sites now.
That makes sense.
I would add to that that the other beauty of that is that if you design the building in a way that those 2 spaces are adjacent, that will give you the possibility, if you know there is an opportunity for opening a wall between the 2 spaces, to have a nice number of visitors or spectators or people for an event in the school. We have done some that maybe the gymnasium has a capacity for 250, and then you have a cafeteria for 200, and then integrated, you can allow like 500 people to participate in an event. So that gives you a lot of flexibility in the new building.
Right. So your spring sings and your kindergarten programs and things like that can all take place in that space.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Rick, I do have some Facebook questions.
Okay. Yeah, fire one away.
Yeah, you did touch on them through your presentation, but one of them was wanting to know again, I believe she's referring to locker rooms outside. Why do we need locker rooms by the football field?
Well, as I mentioned in the presentation, the original design was for having locker rooms outside. That grassy space is close to the current bathroom concession building, so relatively easy to access the sewer and water. But again, we currently run those teams, and it isn't just football, it's boys and girls lacrosse. It's occasionally boys and girls soccer. If their field is either double booked or it's wet, we can still play on the field surface at the stadium. And just having those locker facilities adjacent to the field, if you look at any of the facilities of the competitors that we play against in our conference, all of them have locker rooms that are at the field level. And instead of running across the parking lot and a good 300 yards away from the playing surface is in everybody's best interest. There's been a couple of times I know in my career where there's been a storm. We've had to evacuate the stadium, and cars are trying to leave and going through the driveway while the athletes are being shuttled across the parking lot and into that storage building. it's just not an ideal situation. So those are some of the justifications. If I talked to any of our coaches, I know that they would have an even longer list than the things that I mentioned.
Same with that same vein with athletics. Question was, I believe, about the auxiliary gym. Why is it needed for another gym?
And if they maybe came into the presentation late, they didn't hear about the combined winter sports participating in one gym. We have JV and varsity girls basketball, freshman JV and varsity boys basketball. Any winter night, you can pull into our high school driveway at 9 o'clock. And then there are parents lined up to pick up those freshman kids who always get the latest time slot. And if we have that extra floor space, we can get those practices done at a reasonable hour and get the athletes home. For after school activities, if there is a contest going on on one of the floors, it's not always true that all of the basketball teams play on the same day. So if the men's team has a contest in the big gym, then the ladies can still practice in the small gym and not lose that floor time. I mentioned wrestling events. The wrestling coach currently would love to host more events, but it's a large scheduling problem because we lose so much practice time from our basketball teams who, when you have a home wrestling event, they have about an hour to practice after school. So those are some of the athletic reasons. And then, of course, during the day, the gym would be there as well and give us the ability to use that for more programming during the day as well.
Another question, Rick, is about the new construction. Good question is, what will the students that attend Acres do during the couple of years of construction, the construction that is? The playground, where would it be able to play, things like that during the new build? Eduardo might have some additional information. He and I have talked extensively over the last 2 years about that site. One of the questions that I asked is, can you tear down a building and put up a parking lot in 3 months during the summer if you time it out that way? And he assures me that happens in lots of places. But yes, the building would continue to be utilized. The new site would be built far enough east to leave a little bit of room for play space and allow the building to be lived and worked in during the construction. Eduardo, anything more specific that you can say about it?
No, just, we have done this many times. Typically, the construction manager in the future, once selected, I'm sure that they will fence the area and provide safety for all the students and parents and teachers that will be using the building during that period of time. They make sure that, people that are working have a separate access to the construction site compared to everybody else. So that is something that will be coordinated. And of course, it will depend also on the design of the building, the final design of the building, but things that are absolutely under consideration during construction times.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that surprises people most who have never been through a process like this, is that you don't start at this point in the project with a final design in place. That process takes so much time and input and design work and redesign and rethink and change and community input, that if you put that amount of time in before you had a yes vote, you would really be taxing people to be able to do that. So it is absolutely something that comes starting May 4th. We start to contact people about being in committees and helping us figure this out in ways that best address what it is that we need to do. And one of those things would be, on that site, we've got to fit everything in so that we can continue to use that building.
The gentleman who asked that question further asked, will the students have enough room to play during that time? During the construction, that is.
Yeah, that we'll have to rearrange some things, obviously. But a lot of the play equipment that is on the Tecumseh Acres playground is from when that building was a K4 building. So there are structures on that campus now that we'd rather not the K1-2 kids spend a lot of time on. So just reducing that space and economizing and changing some things would be on the front end of the project. We would absolutely make sure that the kids have room to play.
And we have a couple more questions that are coming in on Facebook, including do we have a timeline on these projects? I know we do have it in the FAQ that we kind of mentioned it, but I'm not sure if you touched on it earlier, Rick.
Eduardo and I have talked timeline more than once. There are things that can probably get done out of order because they're not going to interfere with anything. One of those would be the field surface at the football stadium. That just needs to get done at a time when the stadium's not being used. So that would have a different timeline. Same with the locker facility there. When I've talked to Eduardo about it, our priority is to address instructional spaces first. But if some things just make sense because, we're not going to be interfering with anything, and the amount of design work up front really is very small, then those things may get placed first. In terms of opening that elementary building, this is just Rick's world. My guess would be that we probably would shoot for trying to open that in the fall of 2026. So still lots to do, 3.5 years worth of design and construction.
All right, looks like we have one more question on Facebook about our current buildings and roofs. The bond obviously passes and we get a new building, we shutter 4 buildings. But if it doesn't, what about the roofs we have? We have some issues that are coming up. How do we take care of those? Or do we take care of them some with our current buildings with the bond? Or does it come from budget?
It's a great question. I've said it several times through different media. Not addressing these issues doesn't make them go away. Over the next 10 years, we're looking at between $10 and $15 million worth of roofs, boilers, parking lots, air handling units, things that are just, have a shelf life and will need to be addressed. And we're going to be doing that in inside and outside buildings that really don't fit our mode of instruction in modern education. So it isn't good investment. The buildings have way outlasted their design compared to our instructional delivery. And to me, I saw an article today that called this project irresponsible, and I would wholeheartly refute that. I think that this is the most responsible thing that this board can do, is to address these projects now, and address it in a way that does not increase the current levied millage amount and reduces the long-term cost in the district operationally from 6 campuses down to 3. I worked at Herrick Park. I worked at Patterson. I'm a part of that tradition. All the people who have gone there over the years and have a heart for the place, I have the same heart for those places. But eventually, things outlive their usefulness, and you have to try something new. And in this case, we can do it with no increase to the tax rate, and we can do it in a way that eliminates some of our operational costs as well.
All right, I'm not seeing any more questions on Facebook right now.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that we had some following on the Facebook feed, and I've already thanked this group. Again, thank you so much. We just want informed voters who are going out on Tuesday and who are talking to their friends and family about this, because it's a big opportunity. It's a very unique opportunity to do so much with no increase. And we're real hopeful that everybody sees it that way. We got a couple of questions in the chat. Okay, those are old. So, all right, I think that's it then. Again, thank you for tuning on and your great questions and your patience through the presentation. That is it for us.